Let's get to some breaking news that is still unfolding. The Trump Justice Department has just uploaded new FBI documents missing from the initial releases of the Epstein files. Right now, MS Now is pouring through these new files. We are taking our time to make sure we get it right, and we want to be careful on what we report on air. Here is what we can tell you right now. 3 of these documents are FBI 302 memos, notes that FBI agents used to summarize witness interviews. These notes contain unsubstantiated sexual assault allegations against Donald Trump. Specifically, they detail an unsubstantiated account of a woman who accused Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein of sexually assaulting her decades earlier when she was just a teenager. One of the new documents reads in part, quote, Redacted was asked whether she felt comfortable detailing her contacts with Trump. Redacted again asked what the point would be of providing the information at this point in her life when there was a strong possibility nothing could be done about it. There are many redactions on these forms. Trump has long denied any wrongdoing connected to Jeffrey.
This is all happening because of a genuine court order linked to a serious fraud judgment. We're not just talking about minor properties here. She's eyeing some pretty significant ones. Think Trump Tower, the well-known skyscraper in Manhattan with his name shining in gold at the entrance. Then there's 40 Wall Street, which is a major office building right in the financial district. Let's not forget Seven Springs, his sprawling estate in Westchester that serves as a family getaway. All his properties, bank accounts, rental income, and cash reserves that fuel the Trump business empire are now potentially in the sights of Letitia James thanks to this civil fraud ruling. She's been pretty upfront about the next steps, looking directly into the camera to tell everyone she's ready to seize his property if he doesn't pay. And just for a touch of irony, her office is literally across the street from one of his buildings. This isn't just a political move. She's making it clear she means business. So the New York Attorney General has this legal process that she's not only authorized to carry out, but is also bound to follow through on. She laid out the steps involved, like freezing accounts, garnishing wages, and appointing receivers. Sheriffs and marshals get involved to make sure court orders are enforced, and it's all based on New York law. This isn't anything new. It's been done in other situations before, and this method can apply to the president, just like it would to anyone else who ignores a court order to pay up.
Lisa, again, I want to just reiterate what Alicia just said for our viewers is we are definitely combing through all of these because these are the 302s, these forms, these FBI interview intake forms were the thing that as we have interviewed survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's abuse over the course of the last couple of months.
So, Simone, we have already seen an initial interview with this same alleged victim and accuser of both Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein in the files. We knew that there were 3 others. In fact, MS Now joined NPR and an independent journalist, Roger Sullenberger, in reporting on how we figured out.
This is where it could really cause some sleepless nights for Trump. When folks hear about asset seizure, they might picture a dramatic scene. Marshals at the door, locks being changed, and a high-profile show of force around Trump Tower. While that image is striking, the truth of how New York handles judgments like this is actually more relentless than a single raid. Right now, Donald Trump is facing a serious deadline as he tries to secure that hefty bond of $464 million due to a civil fraud ruling against him. Authorities aren't wasting any time. The pressure is ramping up as the New York Attorney General Letitia James moves forward with steps to potentially seize some of his assets if he can't get that bond sorted by Monday. She has filed documents to start taking control of his golf course in a large estate out in Westchester County. Trump's team is claiming that getting that bond is next to impossible for him. It's not just one dramatic moment. It's a long, slow grind that tightens around him like a vice. It starts with cutting off cash flow, then moves on to restricting his ability to make transactions. So here's the lowdown on what's going down with Trump's properties. It all kicks off with judgments filed in New York City and Westchester County, which has already happened. These judgments are a big deal because they put liens on every property Trump owns in those areas, meaning he can't sell, transfer, or refinance anything without first dealing with the judgment. Next up, they start freezing bank accounts and garnishing cash. That means any money coming in from Trump's organization, whether it's rent from tenants at Trump Tower or lease payments from office spaces at 40 Wall Street can be intercepted by the state before the Trump Organization even sees it. If freezing those accounts isn't enough, the court can appoint receivers. These receivers are like court-appointed managers who take charge of running individual properties. They handle everything from collecting rent to paying bills and managing operations, all while preparing the asset for a possible sale. What's critical here is that these receivers don't answer to Trump. Their boss is the judge. So even though Trump's name might still be on the buildings, they actually belong to the court once a receiver is involved. And make no mistake, this is all backed by New York civil enforcement law, which applies to judgment debtors without any special treatment for the president. Now, understanding how this whole process works is essential because every step is designed to make things increasingly uncomfortable for Trump. The recent fraud judgment came from Judge Arthur Engoron, and it's not just a minor issue. It's about $450 million. That hefty amount reflects the seriousness of the fraud that was uncovered and the financial gains Trump made by inflating property values over the years. New York law gives him two clear options: pay up or fight back. So here's the situation. Trump is in a bit of a financial pickle. To deal with this, he had two options. Paying up means he would either need to write a check or arrange for a wire transfer to cover the whole amount. On the flip side, fighting it means he would have to post a bond to secure that the money would be ready if his appeal doesn't go through while he keeps on battling it out in court. Now, it gets interesting because his team tried to get a bond. But here's the catch. More than 30 companies turned him down. Imagine that. 30 professional firms whose job is to evaluate people's financial situations looked at Trump's finances and just said no. They clearly weren't confident that he could handle the payment. That rejection from so many companies speaks volumes and shows something that no flashy speech or tweet can change. The financial world doesn't believe in the worth he claims. An intermediate appeals court stepped in after, and they agreed to let Trump post a lower bond of $175 million, which for now puts a pause on the enforcement while he goes through the appeal process. But let's be clear, this bond is just a temporary fix. It doesn't wipe away the judgment or lessen the amount he owes. And if he loses the appeal, it all comes back full force with enforcement ready to roll. Now, Letitia James was straightforward about how her office plans to enforce the judgment. She laid out the game plan on television. And trust me, the first steps are the toughest and quickest. Before any real action happens at Trump Tower, before a receiver is appointed or properties are seized, the state goes straight for the cash. They freeze bank accounts, garnish funds, and intercept any incoming money. And they do it through court orders that snap into action as soon as they're issued. Picture this. If a bank gets an order to freeze an account from New York, they won't be having any chats with Trump's lawyers. They just freeze the account right away. That means any cash in there, whether it's operations, rental deposits, or personal savings, is completely off limits for Trump and his organization until the court gives the green light. For a business like the Trump Organization, an account freeze can spell disaster. After all, real estate runs on cash flow, and they need money coming in consistently to cover mortgages, insurance, and all those essential expenses. Trump Tower is a bustling place with hundreds of tenants, and their rental payments are crucial for keeping things running smoothly. If those payments get intercepted by the state and diverted into a court-controlled account instead of going into the Trump Organization's account, the building just can't function. The mortgage goes unpaid, insurance lapses, maintenance crews stop showing up, and the lights will only stay on as long as the utility company allows credit. It's like a house of cards. A building that can't pay its bills will start losing tenants, and when it loses tenants, its value takes a hit. A drop in value makes it even tougher to sell for a price that can settle any debts owed. This whole situation spirals downward, all starting from the moment those accounts get frozen. Freezing accounts is the first step in enforcement, not the last. It ramps up the financial pressure on the defendant to either settle or pay up. Every day, accounts are frozen means the business is bleeding money, and everyone in the legal system knows this tactic is designed to put the squeeze on. The quickest way to get a judgment debtor to negotiate is by shutting off their cash flow. If freezing accounts and garnishing wages don't cover the judgment, the court might appoint a receiver to take charge of the properties. That's where things get serious, and the image of marshals surrounding Trump's buildings becomes less dramatic and more grounded in legal reality. When the state requests that the court appoint a receiver for a property and gets the nod, that receiver steps in with operational authority. They take over the management office, communicate with tenants, collect rents, hire and fire staff, and make all the decisions for that property. To facilitate this transition smoothly and make sure there's no interference, the court can send enforcement officers, including marshals, to oversee the transfer of control. This isn't a raid or a SWAT-style operation. It's a civil enforcement action, but it does involve law enforcement, making sure everything goes according to the court's orders. If Trump or his team don't cooperate and they try to block a receiver from entering his properties or accessing management systems, the enforcement officers can step in and force their way through if needed. This isn't just some dramatic story. It's how civil enforcement law works in New York for those who don't follow court orders. The interesting part is that it doesn't matter one bit that the person involved is the President of the United States. The legal authority remains the same. Now, here's where things get really serious for Trump. The properties that have caught the eye of the authorities aren't just business holdings. They're a huge part of who he is. Take Trump Tower, for instance. It's not merely an office space. It's his home and the launch pad for his presidential campaign. The lobby has become one of the most iconic spots in American politics. When you approach, the gold letters of his name greet you from blocks away. So imagine a court-appointed receiver taking over that building. It would mean that the rents Trump relies on could be directed to a court account instead of his own. And decisions about the future of the building would be made by someone reporting to a judge instead of Trump himself. That's not just a financial concern. It goes deeper than that. For someone whose entire persona is built on being a successful and wealthy real estate mogul, losing control of Trump Tower would be a crushing blow. It would serve as visible, undeniable proof that the empire he spent a lifetime building could be taken from him by a legal system he has tried to manipulate. And it's not just Trump Tower. Properties like 40 Wall Street, Seven Springs, and every other one that reflects his brand are equally at risk. Each of these locations symbolizes his identity, and each one is in the crosshairs. The legal process threatening these properties isn't some hypothetical situation. A judge has already ruled against him, citing fraud based on careful evidence review, and enforcement actions have been put in place. Right now, the only thing standing between Trump and the possible seizure of his properties is an appeal and a reduced bond that has only bought him a bit of extra time. The whole situation is really interesting, especially considering how things are unfolding with the enforcement. So here's the deal. Everyone's been wondering when the marshals will actually step in. When will they start enforcing the judgment? When will they freeze accounts? Well, it all hinges on Trump's appeal. As long as that appeal is in the works and there's a reduced bond in place, everything is on hold. This bond ensures that the funds will be there if Trump loses, so the state can't touch his assets while it's active. However, appeals can't just drag on forever. Eventually, the appellate court will make its ruling, and it could go in a few ways. They could fully uphold the judgment, meaning Trump would owe the entire $450 million, and things would get moving right away. Alternatively, they might modify the judgment, either reducing the amount or tweaking some conditions, which would start a different enforcement process. The last option is a complete reversal of the judgment. But given how thoroughly documented the fraud is, most legal experts think that's pretty unlikely. The general consensus is that the judgment will be upheld, at least in a significant portion. Once that happens, the pause is lifted, the bond is called, and if Trump can't raise the full amount, which a number of companies have already suggested he can't, then all the enforcement actions that were lined up will kick in. We're talking account freezes, cash garnishments, liens, appointing receivers, and enforcement officers will be sent to the properties to make sure the court's orders are followed. Time is definitely not on his side, with the appeal still pending, while the enforcement measures are all set and ready to go as soon as the court gives the signal. It's fascinating to look at this carefully because the way the enforcement is structured means it's going to ramp up gradually. As time goes on, the pressure on Trump will only increase, and every step taken makes the next one more likely. Civil enforcement tends to start with less intrusive options like liens and account freezes, and then escalates based on how the defendant reacts. If Trump pays the judgment, everything stops. Or if he posts a sufficient bond, that would pause the whole process too. But if he doesn't do either, then things escalate to the next level. Each level is more noticeable and intrusive than the one before. For instance, liens are just paperwork that the county clerk files away, so they're pretty much invisible to most people. Account freezes only concern the banks and the parties involved, but things like receiver appointments and property seizures become very public. Those actions make headlines and show images of enforcement officers at Trump's buildings, making it all the more real. It's like a ladder of escalation. Once a court has allowed account freezes and the money still isn't paid, it makes appointing receivers a much stronger case. Then if receivers are in place and he hasn't settled his debts, selling off properties becomes almost a given. There's a clear logic behind it all. Each step is both a consequence and a warning, and right now Trump is on those middle rungs, holding on to that appeal, his only hope. If that handhold slips, he could fall all the way to the bottom, which would mean a court-ordered sale of his properties. Then there's the interesting part about those 30 companies that won't bond the full judgment. It's telling you something about how the financial world views Trump's actual worth. Their refusal proves he can't easily scrape together the cash to satisfy what he owes. This insight turns the idea of enforcement from just a theoretical situation into something pretty likely. If Trump could just write a check for $450 million, this all would be over. And if he could put up a bond for the full amount, the entire process would hit pause for the time being. But those 30 firms looked at his financials and flat out said no. They assessed his properties, considered their true market values instead of the inflated numbers on his statements, analyzed his debt situation, and figured out how liquid he really is. The conclusion: there isn't enough equity, cash, or unencumbered value in his portfolio for such a significant bond. That's a professional assessment from firms with no political motives, and it highlights just how limited Trump's ability is to meet the judgment. He did manage to post a reduced bond of $175 million, but that's still quite a bit less than what's needed. If the appeal doesn't go his way and the full judgment is brought back, he'll have to find the rest of the money, which is no small feat. There are already 30 companies that have stated there's no collateral available. Essentially, this means the process will involve enforcing the judgment through account freezes, garnishments, and even property seizures, rather than relying on Trump to pay up voluntarily. That's the direction things are headed, and the financial experts seem to see it the same way. Now let's talk about what could happen to Trump Tower. Losing control of it would be the most symbolically devastating blow of his presidency. This building isn't just a business. It's an embodiment of Trump's identity and brand. Every president has that one image, moment, or visual that sums up their legacy. If Trump Tower were to fall under the control of a court-appointed receiver and those gold letters were taken down, or worse, if the money it makes went to the state instead of him, that would say more about his legacy than any rally or speech. It represents everything he claims to be: wealthy, powerful, a winner. Sacrificing that image, not to a competitor or a market decline, but due to a court ruling on fraud, would be an undeniable hit that shows the empire was built on shaky foundations. Standing in front of a tower seized by the court, he can't just shout he's a successful businessman. If a court takes over a skyscraper, how can he tell voters he'll fix the economy? The symbolism here is unavoidable. And Trump, who has a knack for understanding symbolism like few politicians ever have, knows just how damaging this would be. That's clearly why he's fighting tooth and nail in the appeals process. It's also why his legal team reached out to 30 firms in search of a bond. And you can see it in how heated and desperate his comments about this fraud case have become. His focus is clearly on protecting what matters most to him, not the presidency or the party, but his brand and his name. Right now, Trump's properties are feeling the pressure of something pretty serious. While the dramatic images of federal marshals suddenly appearing might capture attention, attention. The real impact is happening behind the scenes, quietly but forcefully. Letitia James has made it clear that if Trump doesn't address that hefty $450 million fraud judgment, she's ready to take his property. Even though the process of enforcement hasn't actually kicked off yet, it's already shaking things up. Every single bank with a mortgage on any of his properties is now acutely aware of that judgment, and you can bet they're reconsidering their positions. Insurance companies covering those buildings are adjusting risk assessments, and major tenants are weighing their options on leases. Do they want to stay in a place that could end up under court control soon? Partners thinking about making deals with the Trump Organization are also taking that judgment into account. It's like a ripple effect. The act of enforcement might still be on the horizon, but the financial ecosystem around Trump's empire is shifting. Lenders are tightening their terms, insurers are raising premiums, tenants are hesitating, and potential partners are pulling back. The buildings themselves are still upright with those flashy gold letters still shining, but beneath that facade, the financial foundation is starting to crack. Every day that judgment looms, every day. The appeal drags on. The pressure builds a little more. The marshals might not need to come for the damage to accumulate. The judgment is doing all the heavy lifting for them, eroding value and stability like water slowly wearing away stone. It's honestly hard to believe this is all happening quietly while everyone's focused on those flashy enforcement scenarios. That said, the repercussions are undeniably real and seriously affecting the landscape of Trump's real estate dealings in New York City and Westchester County, where Trump Tower, 40 Wall Street, and 7 Springs are situated. There's some serious legal drama going on. After the appeal finishes, if the court's judgment stands, the Attorney General has a whole toolbox ready to use. She could freeze Trump's bank accounts, snatch his cash, take over his rental income, and even appoint receivers to run his properties. Plus, there are enforcement officers set to make sure all of this happens without a hitch. Interestingly enough, 30 different companies decided against bonding the entire judgment, which is a pretty clear signal to the financial world that Trump might not be able to handle the full amount. Right now, the bond is reduced to $175 million, which has temporarily slowed things down. But if the appeal doesn't go his way, that full sum will be due, and all those enforcement steps will kick into gear. These properties that proudly display Trump's name, the very buildings he has touted as proof of his success, are just one ruling away from being swept into a court-ordered collection process that he won't be able to stop. The groundwork for enforcement is all set. Liens are filed, and the Attorney General is ready to spring into action. Meanwhile, the man whose name is linked to those iconic buildings is keeping a low profile, hanging out in the Oval Office while the clock ticks down on an appeal that will decide if his famous real estate portfolio stays his or turns into a court-appointed receiver's asset as part of a fraud judgment. It's definitely a situation worth keeping an eye on, because once that appeal is decided, everything the Attorney General is prepared for will switch from idle to full throttle. Accounts will be frozen, garnishments will start, receivers will be put in charge, and those gold letters on the buildings, they'll start to represent something entirely different. No longer symbols of success or wealth, but the state's collection on fraud, property by property,